Hi, as much as it may be a stupid waste of time to do this in the 2-day alpha demo, I wanted to take a look at SBMM. I know it's at the front of many people's minds, same for me, so I'm here to share the results of some testing I ran for Cold War. When I say testing, of course, it'll be similar to sharing my experience so far, but I did also track a bunch of numbers for it to be a little more concrete than just saying it felt hard or easy, and I did also compare results with an alt account. Not like the sample size can be anything good in this amount of time, but I do think there's interesting stuff here that actually went against what I thought I felt, which is good to be surprised by results, not just confirming a bias. So there's a lot to explain here. I like to give a quick answer at the beginnings of videos, but I really can't do that here. I need to show you what I did so you can decide for yourself if it's any good. To not explain all the shortcomings of this testing would be irresponsible, no? I would never do something like that. First, I'll run through what I did here. These are my first 35 games of the beta in order. This is every game I've played so far, all of them in the core mosh pit mode. I didn't touch combined arms. I tracked my KD, and I also typed in the names of everyone in the lobby, some 400 people, into COD Tracker to get their Black Ops 4 lifetime KD, skipping over Modern Warfare because of all the SBMM craziness in that game. I just figured this was simpler. Now, obviously, many people either didn't play BO4 or are using an Activision display name, which I can't look up. But thankfully, since it isn't crossplay yet, I did get a good number of hits for PSN names, and I listed all those KDs to get an estimate for that person's long-term average skill. Well, 2 years ago. People can change over 2 years, but don't worry, I'll poke plenty of holes in this later. For my first 10 games, from the very start of the beta, I thought it'd be fun to play in my external capture card software. Turns out it's pretty much impossible to kill anyone with several seconds of delay. That's a joke, but for those 10 games, I played like a total bot. I also want to say I don't do this crap in the full releases of the games. SBMM sucks ass, but reverse boosters do too. I don't support that, and I don't do it. Aside from inadvertently when working on Riot Shield camos, can't do anything about that if the game decides I'm bad for using a Riot Shield. Anyway, I played terribly here, but I also tried to do it believably. I didn't suicide, I didn't AFK, I just walked and ran around, a little bit of spraying, sometimes hitting people, getting a couple kills or assist kills here and there, a little bit of objectives, but plenty of deaths and just horrible stats. Okay, for the next 10 games, I switched to playing completely normally. Now, I was never the best COD player, and I'm even worse now, very out of practice on controller and spoiled by PC privilege, but with the help of the busted Type 63 that nobody was using yet, I was doing just fine. I continued to track my KD and everyone else I could look up in the lobby. Before getting to the third chunk of games, I'll pause and look at what we saw so far. In the string of 10 bot games, the KD of the players I saw were pretty well mixed. Plenty of people above and below 1. Already night and day compared to the Modern Warfare beta, where at first their system seemed incredibly strongly linked to your recent performance, and all it took was under 5 games of playing bad to find yourself in botland, or a couple where you go off to be tossed into the CDL. That never happened here. To add a dash of subjectivity, these lobbies all felt mixed the whole time. Like around game 3 or 4, I remember running into a few pretty bawdy people and thinking, uh-oh, it's starting to kick in. But then other people in that lobby were still hopping and sliding around, drop-shotting, and that continued through everything. Even when I switched to playing normally and was doing pretty well, I still often died to a player that was very capable. When I watched the kill cam, they looked good. It's not like I was ever in a bizarre bot world. That said, I was doing a bit too well. I was winning gunfights a bit too easily. At the time, I mostly chalked that up to just my loadout being OP, that goddamn delete button of a semi-auto, and seeing the fact that there were clearly players of all KDs in these lobbies, I was thinking the SBMM's pretty hard to detect here. No doubt there is some, but it must be based on a much longer-term average, so it's harder to feel compared to a couple good games putting you in hell. However, this test is pretty garbage, and looking again at all these KD numbers, while it's hard to take much meaning from them because there aren't that many, much more on that problem later, but there is a bit of a trend in what's here. Around game 8, all the KDs suddenly got pretty bad. They're all below 1, except for one crazy outlier at 2.3. It's as if maybe all those bot games just took a while to start to change things. So on to part 3, where I think it gets more interesting. I knew I needed more testing here. People wouldn't be happy with just that, because if it really takes that long for the matchmaking to adjust and change things, then what I needed was a fresh account to clear my messy history. Luckily, you don't need to pay anything to play this open alpha, so I made another PSN and Activision account with no Call of Duty history whatsoever. And this time, I just played normally right out the gate. No nonsense. to see if my lobbies would get gradually harder or if I could feel any sort of difference, like if I started to consistently get shat on compared to before. I used the exact same loadout the entire time, by the way, my OP overkill double type, so that wasn't something that changed, and I played 15 games on this fresh account. More would always be better, but time is limited, so I mainly wanted to get well past the 8 games mark, where things seemed to start changing the first time. When I was playing these, I still felt like I was doing alright, and I still felt the entire time like the lobbies were actually pretty mixed, especially compared to Modern Warfare, but the numbers do tell an interesting story. They started out fairly average, and did tend to get higher over time. The games where I only got 1 or 2 people doesn't mean much at all, but just looking in the couple games where I got tons of hits on the Black Ops 4 stats, I was typically facing several good players, with maybe an average or below average one mixed in. Like, again, down here with these guys, which is a funny contrast to before in these 10 games, where I was generally facing several below-average players with 1 good player mixed in. The complete opposite. Again, this isn't very meaningful when I can't get the stats of everyone in the lobby, but again, I'll get to that. One final stat I thought was pretty cool. If I take the average of all those KDs, everyone I could find, in these 10 games of playing normally, following the bot games, that was a 0.76. That was my average competition, and as a result, my average KD in those 10 games was nearly 3. I'm not a 3 KD player, OP gun or not, I wasn't even playing with audio. Then, doing the same thing with these 15 games of playing normally on the alt account, my average competition was 1.25, and as a result, my average KD was down to 2. What a satisfying result, seeing a similar connected change in both of those numbers. Before someone says, oh, well, obviously that's how KD works. If theirs goes up, yours goes down. But remember, those are Black Ops 4 KDs. That has nothing to do with how they happened to perform in that particular single game. It's just a rough judge of their long-term skill potential. Anyway, even though this selection of BO4 KDs kinda sucks, as I've said, and that makes these averages not mean a whole lot, my KD does match up pretty well with the fact that I was facing tougher competition, even though I didn't really feel that very much. To talk more on those Black Ops 4 KDs, the 2 main reasons I couldn't grab someone's info would be, 1, they're using their Activision name and they customized it, and you might theorize those people could be more into COD and less casual if they went and made a custom Activision name, so maybe good players are underrepresented here. But then also, the other reason I couldn't get data is sometimes the name comes up, but they have blank stats because they never played BO4, and maybe those people who didn't play BO4 are in the more casual crowd because they don't play every COD, so then maybe lower skill people are underrepresented. Hey, that kind of canceled out. Not really, doesn't work that way. But that flaw aside, at the very least, those people with their high and low KDs were in those games. That much is true. And that does say something, even though having the data on every single person would be way better and would certainly change the averages. There was also the slight chance I could get the wrong person because maybe they were using an Activision display name and I got a completely different person's PS4 account who just happened to also play Black Ops 4. To try to avoid that, there were a couple cases where I just skipped people with an extremely common word like Sad or John, since it seems much more likely that that's an Activision name. To touch on a few other obvious problems, the biggest one is always sample size. I had 1 day to devote to doing this. Also, when using my account before I made the alt, well, who knows what data they use? It's my Activision ID. They could pull all my data from plenty of other games if they wanted to use that to help determine what kind of player I am. Another big thing that makes this all pretty dumb is, obviously this is a tiny alpha demo. Who knows if this is anything like what they plan to use in the full game. But we just won't know anything until we see. Maybe it could be made stronger when crossplay comes in. Maybe that's even a big reason they felt they needed it in the first place. Or another thing, in this alpha, everyone is level 1. Although you can't actually rank up the icon, there is kind of XP in the background. But maybe level will end up being a component of matchmaking, and that just isn't in the game yet. I think there was some evidence to suggest rank was relevant in Modern Warfare. Also, maybe it'll just be more noticeable. You could also go full conspiracy and think maybe it's just turned down right now to trick us into buying the game, and then it'll go full Modern Warfare come release. Well, I don't know about that, because in that case, think about who they would want to trick into buying the game. Maybe there's a big casual crowd they would want to attract with an open alpha, and give those people an easy protected time, rather than try to convince the more hardcore players that the SBMM ain't so bad, when those people might buy the game and complain no matter what. So that's kind of not worth discussing. There are no doubt more holes I could sit here and poke in this. Obviously, just take from it what you will. If there are any extremely high IQ scientists with multiple degrees watching, yeah, I'm not submitting this as my thesis. This is actually just a YouTube video where I want to discuss something that's important to a lot of people. The goal was to have something just slightly better than the alternative of people making a judgment based on playing a couple games, running into good players, and blaming SBMM, or just seeing other people complaining about it and hopping on the bandwagon, which I'd be more than happy to do if I saw more clear evidence of it, because I do hate it, and I don't want it in the game, but I think it's also important to not cry wolf if we ever expect them to take our complaints seriously. I'm always going to call it how I see it. Happening to run into sweaty players is not SBMM. That's just going to happen sometimes, especially in this alpha environment. I know feelings alone are not to be trusted, even if it seemed pretty goddamn obvious in Modern Warfare. Hey, I think I stayed pretty quiet about it throughout Modern Warfare after the beta. I mentioned disliking it when it was relevant, but at least I didn't keep making complaining videos throughout the year about how I feel like the Warzone SBMM got stronger. Wouldn't want to irresponsibly get people riled up about the boogeyman SBMM without proper evidence, would we? Yeah, that would be truly reprehensible. I can't imagine doing that. Alright, to draw some final conclusions and give some thoughts, what did I get from this? From feeling and numbers combined? Well, I'd say there's obviously some amount of SBMM, because that's easy to assume without having done any of this. There's always some in every game, in case you didn't know. But this time around, it seems more based on longer-term performance and looser overall, rather than immediately throwing you into a different lobby based on recent games where everyone is your equal. That also goes together with how lobbies thankfully don't disband automatically anymore. If you like a lobby, you can stay there. In general, throughout all my playtime so far, lobbies clearly seem more mixed, which I think is better, and I see many people who despised the SBMM in Modern Warfare having that same feeling. Of course, there are people on the other side too. There's a huge disagreement between the people saying insanely strong and people not feeling it at all. I think that says something in and of itself, because I think it was much more lopsided in the Modern Warfare beta. Pretty much everyone agreed there. It was pretty darn clear from watching tons of gameplay examples from people of different skill levels. The main debate was people arguing about it being good or not. Here it seems like lots of people are on both sides of thinking there are varying amounts of SBMM. I guess I'm in the middle, where there's clearly something going on, but it's quite far from the insanity of Modern Warfare to me. For the people saying it's worse than Modern Warfare, well, it's not like I can just say you're completely wrong. Like, even big names, some pro players are saying it's awful, and you'd think they have a good feel for these things. It's not like they're just not as good as they think they are. I heard that maybe being in a party has a big impact on matchmaking you with other sweaty parties, and of course this entire video was done solo. Also, yes, you can make a fresh account and reverse boost super hard and probably find bot lobbies, but you can do that in any COD. That doesn't prove much. That's why I used my alt account in a different way. And in those 15 games, I did feel I was facing harder people than the 10 on the other account. It did feel a bit more difficult, but I guess not offensively so. It wasn't anything like Modern Warfare, where you do good and you get immediately punished. The lobbies remained varied the whole time. There were always some average or below average players mixed in. I honestly got the feeling that I was playing worse in those 15 games. It was an amazing feeling to be blaming myself for once for doing poorly, instead of blaming the game for having match-made me into some kind of hell. And like a couple of those games, I kept getting thrown into losing games on progress, so my scores weren't great in those. A couple others, I felt like my team was just clearly worse, and one we were down to 3 people, so we didn't really have map control, and that happens. Obviously that isn't SBMM, that's team balance. It was great to feel like I could decide how well I would do in each game, instead of hating the game for kind of pre-deciding that. That's one of the biggest issues I have with SBMM. Like, on the flip side last year, I couldn't even feel proud of a super good game, cause I'll just think, oh well, the game must have given me an easy lobby. I need to be able to blame myself for my failures and for my successes. To be clear, of course I hate strong SBMM. I've explained tons of times why it pretty clearly ruins the casual experience for both good and bad players. You always see the counter argument of, oh, you just want to pub stomp bots, screw you. Well, no, I don't. And you can only do that with abusable SBMM like last year. Without it, you're facing mixed lobbies, a random selection of what the player base has to offer. So the better you are, the more often you'll do well. But if the team balancing is decent, you'll still be facing other good people. It's just that not everyone in the lobby will all be equally good or bad. It's mixed. That's the point. It also means the less skilled players will still have a chance against the other low skill people on the other team. And it's COD, so everyone has a chance against everyone with all the cheesy strategies in this inherently uncompetitive casual arcade shooter. There's a reason Pro COD needs to restrict half the guns and maps. So yes, clearly I think strong SBMM has no place in casual matches. When there's no rank to show for your effort, it just makes sense. What are you playing for if you can't feel yourself improve? See yourself start to do better and better, climb the scoreboard over time, be earning more streaks. That's engaging, that's improvement. If you immediately get pushed back down and never know how good you are or how you stack up, what's the incentive? Plus, last year it ruined partying up with people better than you, it ruined that casual aspect of just messing around with goofy guns. Alright, I think that's all. I don't know if anyone was satisfied by the results here. Sorry if I didn't come out hard enough with the extreme proof that there's insanely strong SBMM. That just doesn't seem like the case. There's something, but there always is. Feel free to call me a shill, even though I just ranted about how much it sucks and how much it plagued Modern Warfare. And I mean, I made an asshole of myself last year being like, look at this obvious SBMM, what the hell? I'm gonna say what I think, and I honestly didn't feel it much at all doing this, and the numbers surprised me, if anything, suggesting there was a bit more than I was feeling. So I hope you enjoyed this waste of time. This doesn't mean much now, and won't mean much of anything come the beta and full launch. I don't plan on repeating this tons of times. I assume other people are going to step in and do a more full-scale test when it's appropriate. I'd love to see what comes of that, because this is definitely a big deal that'll affect people's enjoyment of this game. For many people, it's maybe the single biggest thing, so I did want to take a look at it early, even just out of curiosity, seeing so much disagreement out there. I look forward to the peaceful and respectful comments. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.